Welcome to episode 467 of the Recruitment Marketing and Sales Podcast. And I'm your host today, Sharon Newey. And we are going to be talking about some of the key takeaways from a recent conference that I attended over in Philadelphia. And this was the NPA Global Network Conference. And what a fantastic few days with some great speakers. Now, I could take a long time sharing everything that I took away. So I've condensed it into some key messages. So let's get started.
Welcome to the Recruitment Marketing and Sales Podcast. An obsessive focus on marketing and sales is the only way to accelerate your company growth. So listen in now as we share the latest strategies and techniques guaranteed to deliver you more placements and profits.
Hi everyone, this is Sharon, and I hope that you and yours are well and enjoying this amazing start to spring that we've had, because I am loving these blue skies and sunshine. And as I say that, I am also acutely aware that we have a lot of listeners down in the Southern Hemisphere, and you guys are leaving summer and probably are well into autumn now. So I hope you're enjoying that particular nice time of year, because it's another favourite one of mine. Now, as I mentioned in the introduction, I had the pleasure of being in Philadelphia in the last couple of weeks, attending the NPA Global Recruiters Network Conference. And what a great couple of days it was. I had an opportunity to check out the city as well. And I hadn't realized how much history there is in Philadelphia, but that probably is for another day. Now, at the conference, we had lots of different speakers, everything from how we look after ourselves as business owners, both physically, emotionally, and our mental health, through to how we look at the kind of financial business model that we have in our businesses to make sure that that's working for us, and looking at AI and everything that we are exploring at the moment in that world of AI, through to being productive and efficient, how we communicate, marketing, and how that makes business development so much easier, and lots of things in between. Now, I could spend a long time talking about everything that I took away when I look at my notes, but what I did was, as I was reflecting, I realized that there were some common themes. So I've pulled out those common themes, and that is what I want to share with you in the next 20 to 25 minutes. Now, of course, when you go away to a conference, there are some key, I think, common opportunities, because, we're going to network, we're going to learn, and there's lots of value as a business owner in taking a step away from our business, giving ourselves breathing space, that all-important thinking time to just reflect on, where are we at in the year? Where are we with our slightly more medium-term business plan? And of course, when you're traveling, when you've got an 8-hour flight, there's a lot of reflection time. Yes, you can watch a movie, you can read your book, but there's a lot of reflection time. And so it gave me a great opportunity to do a lot of that. I came back with lots of ideas generally. And also on the trip back, I guess having reflected on everything that I'd been hearing and all the conversations I've been having, that kind of gave me more food for thought and a slightly longer action list and to-do list as well. But also, of course, the value of networking and spending time in, the company of other like-minded business owners who were having different experiences. What can I learn from them? What can I learn about the market? What ideas can I take away? What can I share about, what we're doing and how we're handling certain challenges, maybe that other people are having, challenges that you've confidently navigated and are getting some really great results with. So I always find, going into those environments, being open to everything that people are talking about, are really learning and thinking about how can I apply that in our business. So I hope that if you're looking at, what are the different conferences that are coming up and you're thinking, I haven't got time, I've got so much to do, think again, because there is so much value in stepping outside of your business and looking over. It's like that helicopter vision, looking over the business and learning, because there is so much going on right now. There is so much that we can learn. So there are 5 key areas that I want to cover. Change is one of them. Looking at communication and the cost of poor communication, because we're communicating all the time to clients, to candidates, to our team members. So we really want to get that right. Looking at how do you stand out and begin to differentiate yourself. Now, there are a number of areas that you can do that, but one of the areas is how you can position yourself as that advisor, that strategic partner, and not be a supplier. Then this won't be unfamiliar to our regular listeners, and that is personal branding. It's interesting how commonly that came up as a topic. And then finally, again, this will not be a surprise to a lot of our listeners on the podcast, and that is mindset and what we believe, and how critical in many ways that managing ourselves and our mindset is going to be with the world that we're in at the moment and with the market and everything that is going on. So let me start then with change, because there was an amazing lady called Grace Hopper. Now, I hadn't come across this lady before, but what an amazing lady she is. After I did a good old Google, Grace Hopper was a computer scientist and mathematician. And she was, one of the first people to write the COBOL coding, which I know is still in use today. And she had this quote that one of the speakers, Matt Linder, shared. And it really struck a chord with me. And she was talking about how, as humans, we are allergic to change. I know that might sound quite strong, but many of us are uncomfortable with change. And she made this comment about the fact that, and think about yourself, because it certainly got me thinking that how often do we find ourselves saying, when somebody introduces a new idea or a new concept to us, that, well, that sounds all well and good, but we've always done it this way and it's okay. Now, here's the thing is, in today's market, with everything that is going on, globally, economically, but particularly in terms of the evolution of technology, is okay good enough for your business? Certainly, it doesn't feel good enough for our business. And so we need to challenge ourselves on that thing of, we've always done it this way. Now, what Grace Hopper was saying was that, she really fights that, when she hears that, when she might catch herself thinking, well, I've always done it this way. And so she had something to challenge herself that she did. And that was, she had a clock on a wall that went anti-clockwise. And I can think of shops where I've seen those kind of clocks in, and you really have to kind of like think and get your head around, so what time is it really? But let's get back to this point about we've always done it this way. I've always done it this way, because that is a great example of where we're in our comfort zone. And, I've heard other people talk about, when we're in our comfort zone, we're not growing. And that is something that we need to be acutely aware of right now, because if we're not growing, we can only be doing one other thing, and that is going backwards. Because when we look around us, so many other people are growing. They're learning new things. They're using AI in new and different ways, and they're evolving their ability to use that and become more productive and more efficient in their businesses all the time. So something that we need to be probably acutely aware of right now and in the coming months and years ahead is how we put ourselves in the strongest possible position to make sure that our businesses navigate everything that is going on right now. Look at challenges as opportunities. And I'll talk more about that later. But to really stop ourselves when we hear or notice that we're thinking, well, but we've always done it this way. I hear people say that, but, when it comes to their marketing, that they've always relied on referral and introduction. Now, that may well have been fabulous in the past. It certainly has built many, many very, very experienced recruitment owners like yourselves. You built great businesses with solid client bases that have been incredibly loyal. But I think that started to change post-COVID and even during COVID. And certainly relying on one source of business, as in referral for new business opportunities, is no longer going to be sustainable or viable if you want to be in business in the next 3 to 5 years. We all need to be in a position where we are open and willing to embrace change. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but perhaps one thing that we need to consider is learning how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Because at the moment, when we look around at everything that is happening in the business world, then the reality is that there's only one certainty, and that is uncertainty. And so we need to be more comfortable with working within that uncertain world, controlling things and focusing on things that we can control, and just kind of like almost like letting go of things that we can't control. And I'll come back to that a little more later when I talk about mindset and what we believe. So think about change then. Get comfortable with it. Get comfortable with uncertainty. And remember this great lady, Grace Hopper. So let me kind of like move on then to the second point, which is around communication. Because, one of the great speakers, a lovely guy called Matt Linder, who is a real expert in organizational behavior, he was sharing about the cost of poor and bad communication. Now, he quoted, some quite startling figures, to be honest. So think about massive global organizations, organizations that have got over 100,000 people. Now, apparently, what the research shows is that size of business, the cost of poor communication is over $62 million per company, which is quite staggering when you think about, the cost of that as an inefficiency, to any economy. Then let's kind of like think about, smaller businesses probably that are more relatable to many of the organizations listening to this podcast. So companies that are around 100 employees. Now, the cost to those organizations is over $420,000, which is still a significant amount of money. And so in this particular session, what we were talking about was, how do you change the impact of the communication that you have to get better results so that you're not costing the organization in the way that currently many businesses are suffering. And it was quite noticeable, really, the starting point for this, because it reminded me of a great book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And I know that many of you will have read that book. If you haven't, it is an absolute classic. It probably dates back to the early 80s. Stephen Covey, who sadly isn't with us anymore, but his son still runs the business today. He had these 7 habits. And the very, very first habit was begin with the end in mind. And so what Matt was sharing when it comes to communication is, if you're anything like the majority of us, we might sit down and think about when we write in an email, we open up our email, whether that's Outlook or Gmail, we compose a new email, type in the person's name, maybe give it a subject heading. We might come back and finish that after we've written the email, depending on your preference. But then, we start typing away, and we think while we're doing that typing, you might even type your email, pop it into ChatGPT or Claude and ask it to refine it for you, and then do a quick bit of editing. And then we send that email. But what Matt was suggesting was begin with the end in mind. And if we really want to improve how effective our communication is and what result that communication delivers for us, then let's start by thinking, what outcome do we want to create with the person that we're sending that communication to, or that we're giving a presentation to, or we're having a meeting and we're communicating lots of different messages in that meeting? What are the actions and results that we want to happen as a consequence of our communication, whatever channel we are using for that communication? What is it that we want people to do differently? The result might be that we want to increase the number of interviews, the number of first interviews that happen. It might be that we want to increase the number of outreaches that we have, because ultimately the result is we want to generate more jobs for our business, and we want to be able to convert more of those jobs. So the ultimate result, obviously, could be conversions, it could be revenue. The actions that we want people to take to perhaps, create more jobs, create more conversions, will be to do more outreach, to get in touch with more existing clients, with more lapsed clients, start reaching out to people that haven't heard of our business. So there will be some of the actions that we want people to take. So if they're the actions, what will influence those actions? And then when we've thought through all those different elements of, if we need people to be doing more cold outreach, if we want them to be doing, more meetings, then what support might those individuals need to do that? Have they got the right tools, the right knowledge, the right experience to do what we're asking them to do? So it might involve some training. So when you think about all those different things, what's the communication then that you need to send either in that email, or what do you need to communicate in a presentation to your team? So it's a different way of thinking. And yes, you might think, oh, crikey, Sharon, I haven't got time for that. I think the thing is, we all need to make time to be doing things differently. So let me move on then to point 3. Now, this is something that we talked about in quite a lot of detail, actually, and did an exercise around at the SFC event last November. And that is, one of the common things that we're often asked is, how can I stand out? How can I be different, Sharon?
I just wanted to take a moment to connect with all of you amazing listeners. As you know, our podcast isn't sponsored, and we pour our hearts into bringing you quality content for every single episode. Now, if you've been enjoying the show, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. You can find me at linkedin.com/Denise Oyston. That's Oyston. Just click that link. Let's connect. And also a quick reminder that sharing our podcast or giving us a shout out on social goes a long way to helping grow our community and getting the message out there to all of the small recruitment companies and staffing companies and search companies that want to do well. Your support does mean the world to us, and it helps us to continue doing what we love. So thanks for being part of the journey. Now let's get back to that show.
And I talk about this with people on sales calls as well as clients. And there are many different things that you can do. And one of them is in how you position yourself in your business. Because if you position yourself as an advisor or as a strategic partner rather than a supplier, then you will start putting yourself ahead of other companies. Because the reality is that there are still thousands and thousands of businesses, in our industry across the globe today who are still approaching how they do business as chasing jobs. And I know for the kind of businesses that we work with that is absolutely not what they're about. We tend to work with clients who, are from smaller, more boutique type businesses, probably under 20, recruiters. And these owners are often incredibly passionate about what they do. They've been in the industry for, 20, 25, sometimes even more years. And they still love what they do, and they are very passionate about giving a great service. And they want to be positioned and be seen as a strategic partner. And that will come back to a number of things. It's almost like, begin with the end in mind, if that is what your outcome is, to be a strategic partner, because something that is an absolute integral element of that is relationships and how you build those relationships. And of course, relationships are all about creating trust. And the more trust that we have, the more your clients, your prospects will listen to your guidance, your advice. And that elevates the conversation. But as you're building these relationships, it's taking time to probably do a lot more listening, asking more questions, and having a conversation with that client or that prospect that isn't just about the role that might have generated that conversation, but it's more about seeking to understand, some more of the more medium-term plans. I'm almost hesitant these days to talk about long-term 5-year planning because that things are evolving and shifting so much that it's almost a challenge to think and plan at that level. So, even the next 12, 24, 36 months probably is more realistic. But, having a conversation with clients, with prospects around what is going to be happening in their business in the next 12, 18, 24 months. What might that mean for their hiring strategy? What might that mean in terms of the skills that the organization needs to hire for? And that begins to take the conversation down a different path than let's just talk about this one particular job. And something else that I feel particularly passionate about here is that, from the clients that we work with and when I listen to other recruitment owners talk, I know that businesses invest a huge amount of time and resources into marketing and creating new client opportunities, attracting those real high quality candidates. Now, the thing that I always remind people of is that marketing and building and nurturing those relationships, it doesn't stop when you gain that new client, when you've placed that candidate in their new ideal kind of like dream role. It starts there, because if we want to hold on to these relationships, develop a relationship with a candidate where they come back to your business as they want to take the next step in their career, we need to keep in touch with those people. We need to nurture them. We need to add value and constantly remind them why they chose to work with you and your business and your team in the first place. So we need to have marketing and nurture campaigns and other activities, events in place where we're constantly keeping in touch, staying front of mind. We're doing personal branding, which I'll be coming on to in a second. We need to keep ourselves front of mind because you've invested so much to gain that relationship, to build that trust. And yet, if we're not consistently grabbing their attention, stay in front of mind, you can guarantee that there will be another business who will be kind of like, putting their foot in the door and pushing that door open and moving in on that relationship. And that is going to be costly to your business. So think about, investing time, building and nurturing long-term relationships, be in it for the long game. And something that is worth absolutely remembering here is that when you start doing email campaigns, it's okay not to expect immediate results if you're going out to a cold audience because you want to build some new relationships. That is not going to happen. Remember, we're in it for the long game. And when people say that things like email marketing doesn't work, it won't have worked for them because they haven't stuck with it for long enough. So just kind of like a little quick reminder there. Now that brings me on to personal branding. Now, you will have heard us talk about this an awful lot. We both feel very passionate about it. And I think the way that we do business today, it has changed. Many years ago, we might have been marketing our company brand, but today, without a shadow of a doubt, personal branding trumps company branding. You only have to look at some of the data on Instagram when you look at company brands versus personal brands. Our own, Richard Branson, for example, probably was one of the first people to grasp this concept over 40 years ago. In the early days of Virgin, they didn't have a marketing budget of millions and millions to go and launch, Virgin Atlantic and, Virgin Rail. So what he did was he had a passion for hot air ballooning and, he did all these amazing trips in the hot air balloon, but that generated a huge amount of press. Now today, Richard Branson's personal brand, he's got about 4.5 million followers on Instagram. Virgin as a business, it's been around for decades. It has 250,000 followers on Instagram. So I could quote you more and more examples with bigger numbers, but the facts are personal branding is absolutely key. People do business with people. I've just been talking about, how relationships are built on trust. People want to connect with us. I think there was one thing that our experience of COVID 5 years ago did, and that was it accelerated the adoption of technology by all of us. Some of the research would suggest that we evolved over our adoption of technology in 7 months, what would normally have taken 7 years had we not been in that situation. And how we connect online and through social media has dramatically shifted. So personal branding, what it isn't about, sharing everything about your personal life online. Yes, I know some people do that, but it's not about that. It's about allowing people to connect with you and who you are, sharing something about your values, what's important to you, what do you believe, but also about sharing all this amazing knowledge and experience that you have so that when potential candidates, potential clients are engaging with you, are seeing your content, they get that, this individual from this company, they really know what they're talking about. They understand my industry. They understand the hiring challenges that I'm having day in, day out. And actually, they seem like an okay kind of person that I'd be happy to have a conversation with. So that is what we want, personal branding content to be doing. So make sure if you're not sharing personal branding posts, down your LinkedIn profile across social media, then start with 1 a week. If you're already doing 1 a week, how about increasing that to maybe 2 a week? Create opportunities for your audience to get to know more about you. And remember, please, this is kind of like a plead, share some photographs of yourself online so people can recognize you. They can connect with you in a visual way as well. So enough about personal branding, because there will be a podcast on here. I'm not quite sure what number it is, but if you search in the search bar on the blog where you can find all our podcasts, or go onto iTunes or Spotify and search for personal branding. You will find a more detailed podcast on this exact topic, which brings me to my final point. And that was, it was quite noticeable across all the sessions that I was able to join a couple of weeks ago, where mindset in some shape or form came into each speaker's presentation. And it's not something that you won't have heard Denise and I talk about. It's something that, again, we both feel very strongly about, because our mindset and how we choose to respond to everything that is going on around us, the beliefs that we have, they are absolutely fundamental to the kind of success that you and I will build for ourselves as individuals and for our businesses. The reality is that there is always things happening to us professionally in our businesses. There's things that's happening in the bigger, wider world, some that we can and some that we absolutely can't influence right now if we think about what is going on from a trading environment point of view. Now, there will always be things going on, in our businesses and personally. And it was interesting because, one of the speakers talked about that, there is this kind of like figure of our success comes down to 10% will be related to what happens to us, and 90% of our success is going to relate to how you and I decide to respond to what is going on. Because if we think about it, we could all go and sit in a movie theatre and watch the latest movie that's come out. And we could walk out of that cinema and we could have a conversation, and you could guarantee if you went to the cinema with a group of 10 friends, some would have had an amazing couple of hours. Some would have thought that movie was far too long, like maybe Avatar 3. My family had quite diverse opinions on Avatar 3. Some would have thought, well, it was okay, but, I'm not overly excited about it. We will all choose to respond differently to that time we spent in that theatre. And so that is a very, very simple thing. So, when it comes to our businesses, we get to choose how we respond to what is going on. Now, if, for example, if we think about the current market conditions, if we choose to believe that those market conditions are affecting our business and we're not doing as well because it is down to those market conditions. Now, if we hold on to that belief, there is no doubt that unconsciously, that belief will mean that we don't do certain things. We don't go about our BD with the same amount of zest and focus. We don't throw ourselves into marketing to make our BD easier. We don't do as much personal branding because we're feeling a little bit deflated, a little bit downhearted, and we're complaining about what is going on. We're complaining about things that we can't change. Now, if we choose a different belief, and that belief might be, well, okay, I can't do anything about what is going on economically with tariffs and everything right now. I can't directly influence that, but what I can influence is I absolutely can influence what we do in our business to respond to what we're experiencing in the market. And what we will do is we will knuckle down and we will do even more BD. We will reach out to more past clients. We will put those nurture email campaigns in place. We'll start doing more personal branding. There are things that you can control and that you can do. And so focus on what you can control. In one session, it was talked about as, be proactive rather than being reactive. And certainly, I think in the market that we're in right now, we need to be on the front foot. And particularly when it comes to things like AI, there are so many AI tools. Lots of companies are adopting them in different ways and adopting different kinds of of them. But it's very, very clear from my time away a couple of weeks ago, people are gaining, 60 minutes a day back, sometimes a little bit more, through how they're using, technology, whether they're just using AI to help them format CVs, to help them structure reports. You guys are using it in different ways. But be proactive with how you learn about AI and decide which tools you want to adopt and get confident and efficient at using before then you incorporate more. I mean, there are so many, it's quite easy to get lost in all of them, but, choose some that you want to focus on and, be proactive and keep open to, different tools and resources that can help you be more efficient. Something as simple, from a mindset point of view, as when you look at what is going on around you, it's very easy to think, well, there are all these challenges, there's all these obstacles that we're facing. It never gets any easier. I've been around in the industry for over 25, 30 odd years. And, if it could just, become easier, but it doesn't. Now, rather than thinking like that, why not think about, the challenges and the blocks that you're experiencing? Look at them as opportunities. If you saw a personal branding post of mine this week, you might be aware that on the weekend, I was doing some jet washing. And while I was doing that, it's kind of like my usual thing this time of year. While I was doing that, I was listening to some podcasts, and there was a great story by one of the hosts that I loved. And it was around business and that individual's view on why they love business. And it was because they love solving problems. And those problems could be a whole variety of problems. And it might be helping clients solve problems, hiring challenges that they're having, solving and finding the right kind of candidate for a role that's been open for far, far too long, costing the business. But not just that, but solving internal business problems. And that might be, why isn't an email campaign, creating more opens? Why aren't more people clicking through? Well, what's the messaging? What's the content I'm putting in there? Is that relevant? Playing around with that until we can get more open rates, we can get more click-throughs. Why isn't my team performing, or particular individual performing in the way that I want? Why are their numbers falling? Why they're not getting the same conversions? It's like, well, okay, what's not happening? What are the behaviors that maybe are not at the right skill level that we need? So what training intervention do we need to put in? The reality is, when we think about it, because it really got me thinking, is that business is about solving problems. And, if we have that frame of reference, then actually, we can embrace it and we look at, well, okay, so how am I going to solve that? That's an opportunity. That's something else that I can solve. And if I approach it with that mindset, rather than, oh my God, this is going to be an even tougher year than ever with everything that's going on. I mean, even I can feel the shift in my energy and my energy dropping when I even give that example, versus thinking, well, yeah, business is about solving problems. So let's get on with solving problems. And what are the opportunities we've got as we look at the external problems we can solve with clients and with candidates and in our own business. And so, it is worth investing time in yourself and managing yourself, your thoughts, because, as the leader of a business, people are looking to you. They're looking to you for guidance, for direction. They're looking to you for being a role model. So be that role model, be proactive, manage your mind, choose the thoughts that you have, and make that decision to choose to be the person that solves problems, that embraces opportunities, that embraces change, that embraces the opportunities that AI can bring for us. And so I hope that those 5 areas of change, communication, and how to minimize the cost of poor communication, how to be a strategic partner and advisor will put you streets ahead and help differentiate yourself, personal branding and a reminder of that, and then mindset. Hope those 5 things resonate with you guys. Certainly some of them will resonate more than others, and that's absolutely fine. Have a great week, and we'll talk soon. Bye for now.
If you enjoy this podcast and this year you are ready to take your marketing to the next level, then check out Superfast Circle. This is a unique marketing program designed specifically for recruiters and their marketeers. You get access to 2 virtual marketing directors, you get consultancy, you get your hand held through the whole process, training, consulting, and we provide content resources. So go over to superfastrecruitment.co.uk/join and check out what's available.